right, so Donald Trump's back in the news.
Yeah.
This time with a promise to expel transgender personnel from the U.S. military if he wins the election.
Right.
It's definitely a hot button issue.
Yeah, for sure.
One that gets people talking, for sure. Yeah. But we're not here to take sides.
No.
Our goal is to really just dive in and give you the information.
Exactly.
Make up your own mind.
That's what we're all about.
We want to make sure you have all the facts.
Yeah, we've got a ton of stuff to get through. News reports, military experts chiming in, medical professionals, even some politicians weighing in on this issue.
So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Trump's saying he's going to sign an executive order on day one.
Wow.
That will dismiss an estimated 15,000 transgender people serving in the U.S. military.
Huge.
Now, this isn't his first attempt at this.
Right.
You might remember back in 2017, he banned transgender people from joining the military.
I do remember that, yeah.
This time, he's going a step further. Not just banning them from joining,
right,
but actually kicking out the ones who are already serving.
That's a big difference, yeah.
So huge contrast from the Biden administration.
Yeah, Biden reversed that ban right away.
Exactly, right away.
Yeah, so to go back in the other direction, that's pretty drastic.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how the reasoning has evolved or changed or whatever.
Right.
Back in 2017, it was all about
medical costs.
Right, medical costs, disruptions to the military. Critics are saying it's more about politics and the culture wars.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say what anyone's real motivation is.
For sure. For sure.
But it definitely plays into those things.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the arguments against the ban.
Okay.
One thing that really stood out to me was the opposition from some top U.S. generals to the 2017 ban.
Yeah, they were not on board.
No, they were not on board, and their argument essentially boils down to
meeting standards.
Right, meeting standards.
Yeah.
That's what matter.
One general put it really well, I thought. Okay.
He said, it's about standards, not an identity.
I like that, yeah.
If you can meet the demands.
Right, physical, mental.
Rigorous demands of serving in the military.
It shouldn't matter.
Your gender identity shouldn't matter at all.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, what are those standards really about? Is it just about being able to fight, or is there more to it?
Right. Is there a cultural element there as well?
Yeah, and 56 retired admirals and generals also opposed the ban.
Wow.
They signed a letter.
Yeah, that's a strong statement.
Advocating for inclusion based on merit.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see that side of it.
Yeah, you don't always think of the military as being on the forefront of these social issues.
Right, exactly. And then the American Medical Association issued a statement back in 2015 saying that the ban was scientifically unfounded.
Interesting.
And discriminatory.
So you've got top military officials and the medical community pushing back against this.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful coalition. Yeah, it makes you wonder, what are the real priorities here?
Exactly.
Is it really about military effectiveness, or is it something else?
Right, and it kind of begs the question, if it is about military effectiveness and meeting standards, then how much weight should we give to societal beliefs?
Right, or anxieties.
Exactly.
Those cultural anxieties that are always kind of bubbling under the surface.
Right, so it's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, a lot of layers to this.
But I do want to zoom out for a second.
Okay.
And talk about the broader social context here.
Right.
We know that transgender people often face prejudice.
Absolutely.
Discrimination.
Even with legal protections in place, it's still a struggle.
It's still a struggle, and it makes you think, could serving openly in the military lead to greater acceptance in society as a whole?
That's a really interesting question.
Because it's an institution that's often seen as a bastion of tradition.
Right.
Very, very traditional values.
So to have that representation.
Yeah, could it shift things?
Yeah. Could it change perceptions?
Yeah. Could it change the conversation?
It's possible.
Yeah. It's really interesting to think about. But we also have to be realistic.
Of course.
Integrating transgender people into the military is a massive cultural shift.
Yeah, the military is not known for being super flexible or quick to change.
No, it's not going to happen overnight.
Not at all.
It kind of reminds me of the resistance to women serving in combat roles.
Oh, yeah, that's a great comparison.
It took decades for those perspectives to change.
And we're still seeing some of that resistance today.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if it'll be a similar trajectory.
It's hard to say.
For transgender service members.
Yeah, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is that any decision about military service has to be based on facts.
Exactly. Facts, not feelings.
Not feelings.
Not political maneuvering.
Not bias.
Not societal pressure.
Right. It's got to be about what's best for the military.
And for the country as a whole.
And speaking of zooming out, let's take a look at the global landscape.
Okay.
Only 19 out of over 200 militaries worldwide.
Wow, that's a tiny number.
Currently allow transgender people to serve openly.
That's surprising.
It is surprising.
It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what are the experiences of those serving in those countries?
Yeah, what are the challenges they're facing?
Are they seeing greater acceptance?
Are there lessons we can learn from them?
Yeah, are there best practices that we can adopt?
It's a whole other layer to this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating.
It's a global conversation.
Yeah, this is not just an American issue.
No, it's something that the whole world is grappling with.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
In this first part of our deep dive.
A lot more to come.
A lot more to come, but for now, we'll take a quick break.
All right, sounds good.
And we'll be right back.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you realize it's a global conversation we're having.
It's fascinating to think about how different cultures approach this.
Yeah.
You know, like what works in one country might not work in another.
Absolutely.
You mentioned India earlier, where transgender individuals are currently barred from serving.
Right.
That seems like a pretty stark contrast to some of the more progressive policies.
Yeah, for sure.
We see in Europe, for example.
Yeah, and even within those 19 countries.
Right.
That allow transgender service, the specifics of the policies vary.
Oh, I'm sure.
Some have really robust protections and support systems.
Oh, interesting.
While others are still kind of figuring it out.
Working through the kinks.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a process.
It is.
It's a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Not at all. Every country's got to figure out what works for them.
Right. Each country has its own cultural context.
Right.
Military structure.
Political landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. Speaking of complicated.
Okay.
I want to get your take on something.
All right.
We talked about the historical parallels earlier.
Yeah. With women in combat.
Right, with women in combat. And it seems like every step towards greater inclusivity in the military has faced pushback.
It has.
What do you think are some of the unspoken anxieties
That's a good question.
that might be fueling this resistance to transgender inclusion today?
I think sometimes what's being presented as a concern about military readiness or unit cohesion is masking some deeper fears
Interesting.
about societal change and shifting power dynamics.
So it's less about actual battlefield performance and more about preserving a certain vision of what the military should look like.
Yeah, who it should include.
Who should be in it.
What values it should represent.
Yeah.
You're right on the money.
It's fascinating how these debates often become proxies for larger cultural anxieties.
It's like the military becomes a microcosm of society, where we play out all of our hopes and fears about social change.
And those fears are often rooted in deeply ingrained beliefs.
Absolutely.
About gender identity.
Yeah, what's normal, what's not normal.
Yeah, challenging those assumptions can be really threatening for some people.
For sure, especially those who feel like their worldview is being disrupted.
Like you're shaking the foundation of their understanding of the world.
Exactly, and when people feel threatened, they often lash out. They cling even tighter to those beliefs.
It's a natural human response.
It is.
But it makes having these conversations really difficult.
So how do we break through those barriers then?
Right. How do we create space for respectful dialogue and understanding?
I think it starts with recognizing that we're talking about human beings here.
Okay.
Not abstract policies.
Right.
Not ideologies.
It's about people's lives.
It's about real people's lives, their dreams.
Yeah.
Their right to live and serve with dignity.
It's about putting a human face on these issues.
Exactly.
But I'm sure some people would argue that the military isn't the place for social experiments.
Right. Or for pushing progressive agendas.
Right. They would say stick to national defense.
Right. That's the military's job.
And leave the social issues out of it. But is it really possible to separate the military from society like that?
I don't think so.
Because the military is made up of individuals who come from that society.
Who reflect those values.
Right.
And who will eventually return to civilian life.
Exactly. It's not like they exist in a bubble.
You're not isolated.
So as society changes...
The military changes too.
Right. It has to reflect those changes.
It's inevitable.
It's a reminder that these debates aren't just about military policy.
Right. It's bigger than that.
They're about who we are as a society.
What we value.
What we value.
How we define our national identity.
Yeah, it's about who we want to be.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so important.
Even if they're uncomfortable.
Even if they get heated.
Right, because they force us to confront our biases.
Our assumptions.
And to think critically about what it means to create a more just, and equitable society.
It's about pushing ourselves to evolve, to grow.
To create a world that is more inclusive and accepting.
For everyone.
Let's bring it back to the specifics of the military, though.
Okay.
One argument we hear a lot is that transgender inclusion could be disruptive to unit cohesion.
Right, that it could create tension or conflict within the ranks.
Right.
But research actually shows that unit cohesion depends more on factors like strong leadership.
Makes sense.
Shared purpose, a sense of mutual trust. Than on the personal characteristics of individual soldiers.
So it's less about who someone is
Yeah.
and more about how well they work together as a team.
Exactly. Can I get the job done?
Right. And the military is already incredibly diverse.
It is.
You've got people from all walks of life.
Different backgrounds.
Different beliefs.
All coming together to serve a common purpose.
Integrating transgender individuals is really just
another facet of that diversity.
Another piece of the puzzle.
It's like adding another thread to the tapestry.
I like that.
It makes it richer.
It enriches the overall fabric of the military.
With different perspectives and experiences.
And history shows that embracing diversity makes organizations stronger.
Absolutely more adaptable, more innovative.
Right. It's not a weakness, it's a strength.
Think about the integration of women, the desegregation of the armed forces. Those are huge changes.
Yeah, radical at the time.
People thought they would undermine the military.
They didn't.
They made it stronger.
They did. They really did.
By tapping into a wider pool of talent and perspectives.
So the argument that inclusion weakens the military doesn't hold up.
Not when you look at the historical evidence.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that strength comes from embracing our differences.
Absolutely not, from trying to erase them.
But I'm sure some would still argue that the military is a unique institution.
Yeah, with its own traditions and value.
Right, and that changing those traditions could be detrimental.
That's a valid point.
What's your take on that?
I think it's true that the military has a unique culture and traditions that are important.
Right, it's part of its identity.
But it's also an institution that has evolved over time.
Right, it's had to adapt
to changing societal norms.
Right, and technological advancement.
We can't expect it to stay frozen in time.
So you're saying that adapting to changing norms and embracing inclusivity is actually a sign of strength.
It shows resilience.
Not weakness.
It means the military is capable of moving with the times.
And change is rarely easy.
It's not. It's messy. It's challenging.
There are going to be hurdles to overcome.
Logistical hurdles, training programs will need to be adapted.
Right.
Cultural sensitivities to navigate.
Yeah, it's the process.
It is. But if the goal is to create a military that reflects the diversity of our nation and attracts the most qualified individuals, then embracing inclusivity is essential.
It seems like this conversation keeps coming back to qualifications and merit.
It does.
If someone can meet the standards, their gender identity shouldn't matter.
That's the bottom line.
But what about the potential medical costs?
Oh, yeah, that's a common concern.
That Trump brought up. Is that a valid concern?
Well, studies have shown that the actual cost of providing health care to transgender service members is relatively low.
Compared to the overall military budget.
Exactly. It's a drop in the bucket.
So it's not this huge financial burden that some people make it out to be.
Not at all. And when you consider the benefits of retaining highly trained personnel, the argument about medical costs becomes even weaker.
It's about investing in talent.
Yeah, and dedication.
Regardless of gender identity.
Absolutely.
It's interesting how this debate pits financial concerns against human rights and equality.
That's a tension we see in a lot of policy discussions.
It is. It's a tough one.
But human dignity and the right to equal treatment should never be sacrificed. For budgetary reasons.
It's about finding that balance.
Right, between fiscal responsibility and our core values as a nation.
Yeah, and recognizing that investing in the well-being and inclusivity of our armed forces is ultimately an investment in the strength and security of our nation.
Well said. I couldn't agree more.
But I know some people would argue that the military is not the place to be making social statements or pushing progressive agendas.
Stay out of the culture wars.
Right, just focus on national defense. But isn't it impossible to completely separate the military from society?
I don't think so.
The values and norms of the civilian population influence the military.
Of course they do. It's made up of people from that population.
Exactly.
It's a reflection of society.
And as society changes,
the military has to change too.
Right. It has to evolve alongside it.
And as our understanding of gender identity and inclusivity evolves, the military will reflect those changes.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this conversation.
We are, whether we realize it or not.
Our beliefs and values shape the institutions we create.
And those institutions shape our society.
Exactly. It's a cycle.
It is, and it's through open dialogue, respectful debate, a willingness to challenge our own assumptions, that we can move towards a more just and equitable future.
Both within the military and in society as a whole.
That's the goal.
Well, this has given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
What about you? What are some of the key takeaways for you?
I think what strikes me is the complexity of this issue.
Yeah.
There are so many factors to consider.
Military readiness.
Social implications.
Ethical consideration.
Political maneuvering. It's not a simple debate.
It's not black and white.
Not at all.
It's very nuanced.
It is.
But I think one thing's for sure.
What's that?
This is a conversation that we need to keep having.
We do.
We need to keep asking questions.
Challenging assumptions.
Engaging with different perspectives.
Absolutely.
To really understand all sides of this issue.
And as we continue to explore it, I think it's crucial to keep coming back to those fundamental questions.
Right. What kind of military do we want?
What values do we want it to embody?
How do we create an institution that is both effective and inclusive?
That upholds the dignity and rights of all who serve.
Those are powerful questions.
They are.
And ones that I think we'll be grappling with for some time to come.
I think so too.
It's not an easy answer.
No, it's not. But through thoughtful discussion and a commitment to understanding, I believe we can find our way towards a more just and equitable future for all.
I hope so.
I do too.
Well said.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Already.
I hope you found it insightful.
I did. This has been a really thought-provoking exploration.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
And for our listeners, the conversation doesn't end here.
It doesn't.
Keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Keep learning.
Keep striving for a world where everyone has the opportunity to serve their country with honor and dignity.
Regardless of who they are.
Well said. It's interesting, we've been talking about all these different aspects of transgender individuals serving in the military. And it's clear there are strong opinions on both sides.
Absolutely. People feel very strongly about this.
They do. But what strikes me is that the public discussion often lacks nuance.
It does. It gets reduced to sound bites and slogans.
Right. It's hard to have a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, you can't really dig into the complexities.
When it's just pro or con.
Exactly.
That's why I think these deep dives are so important.
I agree.
They give us the space to explore all the different angles.
To hear different perspectives.
And to move beyond those simplistic arguments.
To really think critically about the issue.
Yeah, and one of the key takeaways for me has been the importance of questioning assumptions.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's about gender identity, military effectiveness,
societal norms.
We have to challenge those preconceived notions.
We can't just accept things at face value.
Right? We have to base our opinions on evidence and critical thinking.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that.
There's always more to uncover.
There is, and as we peel back those layers, we see that this debate is about more than just transgender individuals in the military.
It's about inclusion, equality, what kind of society we want to live in.
It's about those fundamental values we hold as a nation.
Absolutely.
How those values play out in our institutions.
Our policies.
Right, in our interactions with each other.
It's about the kind of world we're creating.
And it's a reminder that these aren't just theoretical conversations.
No.
They have real-world consequences for people.
They affect people's lives in very tangible ways.
One thing that I keep thinking about is the historical context.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about the integration of women into combat roles, the desegregation of the armed forces.
Those were huge shifts. They faced a lot of resistance.
But looking back, they're seen as progress.
Milestones in the fight for equality.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder how future generations will view our current struggles.
That's a great question.
Will they see this as another turning point?
Or will they wonder what all the fuss was about?
It's hard to say.
History often surprises us.
It does. What's radical in one era can become commonplace in another.
Think about interracial marriage. Or same-sex marriage.
That's true.
Ideas change over time.
It underscores the importance of staying open-minded.
Of challenging our own biases.
Being willing to evolve.
As our understanding of the world changes.
And I think that's what I hope our listeners take away from this.
What's that?
It's not about finding all the answers or declaring a winner.
Right.
It's about engaging in thoughtful dialogue,
respectful debate,
recognizing the complexity,
knowing that there's always more to learn,
and that we're all learning together.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought. Okay. Imagine a future where serving your country is based solely on your ability and willingness to contribute, where individual identities are respected and valued.
That's a powerful vision.
It is.
Where the military truly reflects the diversity of our nation.
That's the future I think we should all be working towards.
I agree.
So until our next deep dive, keep those minds engaged.
Keep asking questions.
Keep those conversations going.
Keep learning.
And keep pushing for a world where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Well said.
Thanks for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.